Hi friends, welcome. In today's short instructional video, I will be going over the alignment of plank pose, which doesn't sound like the most exciting thing I know, but it's also a very important pose to go over because oftentimes we'll spend years practicing it incorrectly and then it can lead to wrist pain, low back pain, things that can be avoided if practiced correctly. I will also show an option of practicing plank with knees down or knees up. So we're going to start by coming to a tabletop position on hands and knees. Stack your shoulders over your wrists, stack your hips over your knees. Gently fan out your fingers and make sure your wrist creases are parallel to the top border of your mat. These are the same hands that we use in downward facing dog. Now we're going to start with some cat-cows very slowly. As you inhale, arch your spine, draw the heart forward and up, slide your shoulders back and pause. Right now we're in a position of extension. This is known as our cow pose when we move through cat-cows. So a couple of things. The shoulder blades are pressing into the chest, broadening the collarbones. The pelvis is rocking forward in an anterior tilt, meaning there's no tone in the belly right now. My belly feels more like a hammock, very unsupported. Take another inhale here. And now exhale, reverse, round your spine. Push the floor away from you and pause. We are now in a position of spinal flexion. You might feel your shoulders spread across your back. Your pelvis is in a posterior tilt, rocking backwards. That's what creates this lift in the low belly, this natural tone. You don't have to suck the belly in, it just does it naturally. And now let's do that again. Inhale, arch, lift the heart, curl the tailbone up. Exhale, reverse, round. Shoulders spread across the back. Tailbone drops to the floor. Let's do one more inhale. Exhale. And now as you inhale, come through center and find a neutral spine. Now what on earth is a neutral spine? So a neutral spine is a little bit different for each of us because we all have a unique, different body and spine. Bring one hand to your low back, and what you want to feel is a very small trench shape, meaning our pelvis is not rocking backwards. We're not tucking the tailbone under and losing the natural curve of the low back. We're keeping the natural curve there. However, bring one hand to your rib cage. We don't want the ribs to flare out because then there's very little core engagement. So can you keep this little trench at the low back, but then lift your ribs away from the floor? And then bring your attention up to your shoulder girdle. So let's do this together. Sink into your chest. Keep your arms straight, but let your shoulders shrug up towards your ears. This is called retraction. And then do the opposite. Push the floor away from you and feel your shoulders move away from each other, spread across your back. This is protraction of the shoulder girdle. So you can sink down and then push away. Now let's find a spot right in the middle where I'm not sinking into the chest. You're not rounding the upper back. The shoulders are resting on the back. You can sit back on your heels for a moment. So a neutral spine, which is essentially what we're working towards in plank pose, is shoulders resting on the low back. Shoulders resting on the back, meaning we're not pushing, we're not sinking, somewhere right in the middle. Rib cage is lifting away from the floor. Pelvis is in a neutral position, meaning I am not rocking the pelvis forward, anterior tilt. I am not rocking the pelvis backward, posterior tilt. My pubic bone and tailbone are equidistant. So that's a neutral spine. That's what we want to feel in plank. However, now this is just my opinion and this is the way I teach. There's not just one way to teach plank pose or any yoga pose. I do teach a little bit more of shoulder protraction, so just a little more pushing. I also teach a very slight, almost posterior tilt. It's not a posterior tilt, but it's on the verge of it in plank, just in plank, because that's going to create the lift in the low belly. It's a stronger plank. To me, it makes it a little bit harder, but it really strengthens the body, the shoulders, the upper back, the core, and can prepare you for other poses if you're interested, such as big back bends, going upside down, or arm balancing. So now let's come to plank pose. Stack your shoulders over your wrists. Hips over your knees. Gently fan out your fingers. Make sure your wrist creases are parallel to the top of the mat. Push the floor away from you. Feel that your shoulders are resting on the back or slightly spreading. You decide. Lift your rib cage away from the floor. Feel the pubic bone zip up towards the navel, almost like you're zipping up a tight pair of jeans. And now from here, move your knees back a big 2 to 3 inches. Reach your chest forward as you push the floor away from you. Lengthen your tailbone to your heels so you're not letting the pelvis rock forward in a back bend. Drop the tailbone towards the heels. Feel the pubic bone lift up and in. You're not sinking through your chest. Push the floor away from you. Now, option 2, always stick with this version of plank with your knees down, or if you'd like, step your feet back. Now, make sure you're not on your tippy toes. Plug into the ground with your big toe mounts. If you're on your tippy toes, you can't use your legs. So press your thigh bones up as you plug into the ground with the big toe mounts. Notice if when you press your thighs up, your pelvis rocked forward. Can you lengthen your tailbone to your heels? Lift the pubic bone up and in. Push the floor away from you. Reach your heart forward as you push your heels back. One more breath in. Exhale, drop to your knees. Point your toes, sit back on your heels. And if you need a little wrist stretch after that, curl your fingers in and roll out your wrists. So always option to do plank with knees down. You can do it with knees up, but make sure you're plugging into the ground with the big toe mounts. So the main actions we just went over were shoulder girdle, shoulders resting on the back, not winging out, not overly rounded, somewhere in the middle. Rib cage lifting up, not flaring out. Pelvis neutral, maybe towards that slight posterior tilt, meaning pubic bone zipping up towards the navel. That's going to create the tone in the low belly. If you let the pelvis rock forward, you're putting a lot of pressure on the low back. And then the legs, and we use the legs by pressing into the big toe mounts. So that is the ball of the foot. Here's my foot. You can do plank with knees down or up. If your wrists start to get tired, you can come down to your forearms with shoulders over the elbows, and then everything else is the exact same. So always feel free to lower to forearms. So that's all for today. I hope that was helpful. Play around with plank. It's a super strong pose. You might even try to work up towards seeing if you can hold it for a full minute to really build strength in the body. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let me know how your practice goes, and I'll see you soon.